Hello everyone, my name is Sarah Holland again, and I am doing my chapter presentation on Chapter 6 and Essays 1 and 2 of the Signorelli text, Story Branding 2.0. So to begin, Chapter 6 is really an overview of just the steps to create a story for your brand. What is the most beneficial path and way to create a successful and viable and relatable story for your brand. And then the essays are just additional tips to just create authenticity and just create a really successful story. So again, this is an overview of those steps. The following chapters in the book will take each of these steps in more depth. But hopefully this overview will give you a jump start into really fully understanding the process and being able to apply it maybe later on in your life. So to begin, the 6 C's are what the steps are called. The first one is collect the backstory. The second one is characterize the brand. Third, characterize the prospect. Connect the characters, confront the obstacles, and complete the story brief. And overall, this is going to really create the foundation of your brand. And the text states, completing this entire process will help you arrive at a marketing communications plan that will serve as the blueprint for all brand communications, both externally and internally. So the cool thing about that is it's not just a one-time thing. So this story is not just to create a one-time advertisement for a new product, but it's really going to be that heartbeat and that foundation for your brand as a whole, that more future advertisements can build off of that same story. And not only that is, yes, it is important to have a story that is relatable externally to those consumers, to the customers, but it's also important to have a story that the employees internally in the company can also relate to and jump on board with and be loyal with. So that's the cool part of creating a story, is it's relatable to a greater crowd, and so it just creates a better attachment as well. So to begin, the first step is collect a backstory. So really this is your brainstorming session. This is really digging into what your brand is, what are the problems that you're trying to solve, an overview of that, and what are the opportunities that you might have that can be successful for your product. And later on you'll dig deeper into these sub-levels, but the backstory is really, what is the beginning? What is the process you're about to jump into? What are you trying to solve? And step 2, which is the next slide, is characterize the brand. So this is really digging deep into your brand. The text specifically states that it's really easy to want to evaluate the customer's need first and create a brand that is specifically for that need. However, the most successful is created through really analyzing your brand first and foremost. So you want to have a brand that you're confident in and that has its strengths and weaknesses, and then finding that specific need that you can meet already through those strengths. So the text really explains this as characterizing it as a hero. So what is your hero of the story? And the text states, it is what comes to the consumer's rescue, satisfying some existing unmet need like no other. So what can you offer based off of your strengths that will rescue a need and that will come in to save the day? So it creates it to be more relatable. So again, you want in this stage to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of your brand. What are you going to really highlight, and what do you need to work on and just kind of be aware of? And most importantly, on top of that, are what are your brand's values and beliefs, and also what are your desires for the future to kind of reach those next goals. So this is just the overview, really getting a really good idea of your brand and what you have to offer, because you want to put your best foot forward as a brand. So that's that step. Next slide. Step 3 is characterize the prospect. So this is really looking into the functional needs of the potential consumers. So why are you selling to this specific audience? So it's not only about what the functional needs are, but the why behind it. So in the step before this, you're looking at what are your strengths, and then now how are your strengths able to meet a need. And yes, those functional physical needs are important. However, you also want to really dig deeper into what are the beliefs and the values that those customers have that are the foundation of that need, because that's what's going to connect the customer to your brand. The text explains this in an example of tires. So when you're buying a tire, there's so many different brands and so many different companies that sell a good and decent tire for your car. However, the brands that are more successful are more relatable through a story to the deeper needs and values and beliefs of safety, and then even deeper than that, parenting even. So good parenting requires a safe car, a safe vehicle, safe tires. So you can see how that story is more related to the beliefs of safety versus just a good tire. So that's just one example. And then what makes the brand better than competitors? What can be more relatable? So what do you need to look out for that you can just be one step ahead of, that will make those consumers and those prospects just more relatable than a competitor? So that is step 3, is really analyzing and characterizing just those prospects and what you can really use your strengths to reach in the future. Step 4 is connect the characters. So this is where you're connecting steps 2 and 3. So you're connecting the strengths and weaknesses and desires and values of your brand to the functional needs and the values and beliefs and the desires of the consumer. So what connects that? What is that one factor that can make that bridge? And that's going to be the basis of your story. So that's where your story is going to start to evolve and become relatable. The text states, short term, we are interested in knowing how the brand satisfies a functional need through its product, features, and benefits. So this is where you start to explain why your product and your brand will fit those needs and those values and beliefs. And you want all of that to align into one and create that bridge in that story. So that is step 4. Next slide. Step 5 is confront the obstacles. So this is really important because every brand will have its obstacles and have its competitors. So what are the potential obstacles that you're going to face? What are the problems that are going to come up either with your brand or with the consumer? So with that, how maybe is your story going to miss the mark? Or what do you need to really look into that can really drive it home? And what obstacles do you need to overcome? Not only that, but what obstacles are your consumers trying to overcome as well as the other perspective of the story? And then from there, you need to prioritize what obstacles you need to confront first. What's the most important things that your consumers are going to want to know that you are overcoming? And so that's really important as well. And then step 6, next slide, is complete the story brief. So this is your overview of your entire story. So this is the outline. This is what you're going to base everything off of. This is going to take you step by step, connecting all of these into your story. It's the birth of your story. It's the creation of it. And this part of it is really important to use I am statements. This is what's going to make that story more relatable. This is what brings your brand alive. And so the text really encourages using I am statements because it personalizes your brand. So the brand is not a person necessarily, but if you're using I am statements, it really makes it more relatable. So the text states, I am statements force us to develop empathy for both characters that would otherwise be and often are missing in traditional creative input documents. So really in that story, you want your brand to become personal and relatable to the customers and to the prospects. You want to use I am statements that are coming from the customer as well, making sure that they feel heard, that they feel known, because that also relates. It shows compassion and empathy. And then using I am statements to personalize your brand as that hero and as that rescuer, to come into that. And so next slide. That is the 6 steps overview. Obviously, again, it is an overview, so the following chapters that will be presented will go way more in depth with that. But now we'll move into the essays and how they can even add to that story branding and what tips they might have. So the first essay that I read is Brands Don't Travel as Far as Stories. And this is so true. Next slide. Stories are lasting. So by going through these steps and creating a story brand, again, makes it more alive. It makes it more tangible and relatable to the consumer and to the prospect. And it creates that longevity that is needed because they become loyal. It becomes an emotional connection as well. Excuse me. So the text states, it should come as no surprise that once a brand is strongly associated with a certain product, it is difficult, if not impossible, to change perceptions. So this essentially is an example of how brands are not lasting, but stories are. So if you're just advertising your product as one thing, you're never going to get out of that. And if you want to even branch out a little bit, you're always going to be known as one thing. Whereas if you have a story that you can build off of as your company grows and as your brand grows, it's more possible to be able to grow in that way. And one example that the text provides is Chiquita in Country Time Lemonade, which I thought, as I was reading that, I totally understand that. Chiquita, I always just think of bananas. But they tried to get into other products, but you always think of Chiquita as banana, and that was their problem, is they promoted banana so much so that they can't really branch into any other produce because of that. And the other one is Country Time Lemonade. They tried to get into apple cider as well, but you always just know Country Time Lemonade. And that's the brand and that's the product, and there's not a story behind it. It's lemonade and nothing else. An example of something that was successful is Apple, obviously, and Nike. Those two companies have really succeeded in creating a brand story and not just advertising their product or their brand. Apple has branched into so many different technologies. Instead of just sticking with computers, they're a wide variety of things because their story and their values are what creates loyal customers. And same with Nike. They create inspirational stories that influence just activity and active living and experiencing and dreaming and meeting goals, instead of just specific athletic wear. So they're able to branch out into a billion other opportunities that are before them. And so that's why stories are way more lasting. It provides that lasting effect because it's a deeper meaning to the consumer. It's something that they'll always remember and that they can connect with. It pulls at the heartstrings sometimes, and so those stories bring it to life again. Some challenges that this essay says need to be overcome is your story needs to be authentic. And that's what the essay next kind of goes into. And the audience also cares what they think is the meaning, not necessarily what you think is the meaning. So that's what you need to look out for as well in your presentation of your brand story, is keeping that in mind. And also look for the problems that provide opportunities as well. Next slide. So essay 2, again, is 5 ways to turn up the volume on your brand's authentic story. So adding on to the authenticity of your story. The first one is ladder up, which means you have to start with the most valued need and find out the whys behind it. So what's going to make your brand authentic is understanding the depth of the needs and prioritizing those needs and getting to the basis of it. And that's the first step. The second step is what your story isn't. So make sure that you are analyzing and recognizing what not to present, what your story will not be. That's also very important. And number 3 is describe the enemy. What do you need to overcome? What's going to prevent you from having an authentic story, and making sure that you're aware of that the whole time. Number 4 is find a role model within the story. So characterize the business or brand by creating it into a hero. Like I said, that's relatable, something that someone can look up to and relate with and create that loyalty that's a little more tangible. And then lastly, get feedback from customers and employees. So this is important because you always need to be growing and creating opportunities to better yourself in your brand. And so this provides a way to understand how that consumer is thinking, so then you can really create the brand story to be even more relatable. And to close, to quote, it says, oftentimes they will interpret your purpose based on their experience with yours and competitive brands. So you overall need to make sure that your story branding experience is more relatable and more purposeful than competitors as well. And so that's why creating a story is so much more important. So like I said, this is an overview, and hopefully it provided some good ideas for the presentations to come. But my question to you then is, stories are lasting because they often create an emotional and relatable experience for the consumer. So with that, what brands do you find tell the best stories and why? And then have you experienced a brand loyalty because of those stories? I want to hear your personal experiences with that. So I'm excited to hear what your thoughts are. Thank you very much.